His wife said, "His presence irritates me, I wish he'd disappear forever." And he disappeared. What he left behind makes her scream. "Honestly, his presence irritates me. I wish he would just disappear forever so I can finally be with you." Those were the words Lauren Miller whispered to her lover on the phone, her laughter sharp enough to cut glass. Unaware that her devoted husband of 5 years was standing in the hallway, hearing her betrayal. She had no idea that the poor construction worker she mocked in secret was about to grant her wish in the most devastating way possible. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about love, betrayal, and the price of taking someone's devotion for granted. Viewers, what would you do if you overheard the person you sacrificed everything for wishing you out of existence? The sound of Lauren's laughter carried through the thin crack of the front door. Aaron's hand froze on the knob, his chest tightening beneath the weight of something he couldn't yet name. He leaned closer, the grit of the day from the construction site still clinging to his boots, and caught the sharp edge of her voice. "Honestly, his presence irritates me. He doesn't even realize how small he is compared to you. I wish he'd just disappear forever." The words slid into him like a blade. His breath caught, his throat closed. On the other side of the door, Lauren's tone softened into a giggle, light and playful, the kind of sound he hadn't heard directed at him in years. Each laugh peeled away the remaining comfort of their 5-year marriage. Aaron stayed still, rooted in the silence of the porch. She went on, speaking in hushed, breathy fragments. The name slipped once, a man he'd never met but had heard of through her passing remarks. Wealthy, charming, the kind of man who sent flowers in glass vases and tickets to places Aaron's overtime wages could never buy. He closed his eyes and listened until the final click of the call ended. Only then did he turn the knob. The door creaked open. Lauren sat curled on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, phone face down at her side. She looked up quickly, her expression smooth, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're home early," she said. Aaron nodded, steadying his voice. "Job wrapped sooner than expected." He stepped inside, set his lunch pail on the counter, and hung his jacket by the door. His movements were slow, deliberate, practiced, each one a mask to cover the fracture widening inside him. The living room smelled faintly of her perfume, the expensive kind she claimed she bought on discount, but that he'd once seen displayed in glossy magazines. Her wine glass, still half full, sat on the coffee table beside an open magazine. She reached for it casually as though nothing had happened. Aaron lowered himself into his usual chair. His hands rested on his knees, calloused and raw from the day's labor. He looked at her briefly, just long enough to memorize the curve of her jaw, the ease with which she sipped, the absence of guilt in her eyes. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. He listened to it, each second hammering into him like nails driven into wood. He didn't speak of what he'd heard. He didn't ask. He didn't demand. Instead, he sat in silence, letting the bitterness settle deep where she couldn't see. Inside, though, something was shifting. The man she mocked as small was no longer wounded. He was calculating. Her words, meant as an insult, had become an instruction. She wanted him gone. And soon enough, she would learn what it truly meant to live without him. The next 3 days passed beneath a thin film of silence. Aaron moved through the house like a shadow, steady, polite, always where he was expected to be, never betraying the storm simmering behind his eyes. He kissed her cheek when she left for errands, brought in the mail, carried groceries in from the car. Lauren moved as if nothing had cracked the surface of their marriage, as if her words hadn't shattered the foundation he'd built with calloused hands and long hours. On the third night, she set a glass of wine beside her dinner plate and leaned back in her chair. Her tone carried the careful weight of a practiced announcement. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring her pasta with a slow, distracted motion. "I need a break. Time for myself. A solo vacation. Just a few weeks to rediscover myself." Aaron lifted his fork, twirled it, and tasted the food. He chewed slowly, his face unreadable in the amber glow of the dining room light. How long? He asked. 3 weeks, she said quickly, almost eagerly. I found this retreat package. Beautiful beaches, quiet mornings, time to figure out what I want. The fork rested against the rim of his plate. He swallowed, wiped his mouth with a napkin and nodded once. If that's what you want. Her eyes searched his face, waiting for resistance. None came. His acceptance loosened something in her shoulders. She took a sip of wine, her lips curling at the edges. I knew you'd understand, she said, almost to herself. Aaron finished his meal in silence, excused himself, and went upstairs to shower. The water beat against his skin, hot and relentless, but did nothing to wash away the memory of her laughter or the words she had spoken into that phone. His chest ached, but beneath the ache was resolve, hardening into something sharp and immovable. The following week moved swiftly. Lauren hummed as she packed new clothes into her suitcase, shopping bags lined up along the bedroom wall. Aaron carried them to the trunk without complaint, folding shirts with careful precision when she asked for help. He drove the silver sedan he had bought for her 2 years earlier, its interior still smelling faintly of leather conditioner. Lauren sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, humming under her breath. New luggage lay stacked in the back seat, tags already printed with her name. The interstate unfolded in long gray stretches, headlights slicing through the early morning mist. Neither spoke much. She tapped her foot to the rhythm of a pop song leaking from her earbuds. Aaron kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. At the terminal drop-off, he lifted her suitcases onto the curb. Travelers hurried past with rolling bags, voices blending into the low hum of announcements echoing across the high ceilings. Lauren smoothed her hair, adjusted her sunglasses, and turned to him. Don't wait up for me, she said with a light laugh. I'll be too busy finding myself. Aaron placed her last suitcase beside her, closed the trunk, and looked at her calmly. Take care of yourself, he said. She leaned in, brushed a quick kiss against his cheek, and walked toward the sliding glass doors. He watched her blend into the crowd, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. Inside, he followed at a distance, waiting near the observation windows. He saw her pass through security, pausing briefly before the checkpoint to glance at her boarding pass. Then she disappeared into the stream of passengers. Aaron remained until the plane lifted from the runway, its nose breaking through the morning haze. Only then did he turn, hands sliding into his jacket pockets, and walk back toward the parking garage. By the time he slid behind the wheel, the plan had already hardened. The car hummed beneath him as he steered onto the exit ramp. The sedan carried him back into town, the dashboard clock ticking past 9 as the city woke around him. Aaron didn't linger at home. By mid-morning, he was sitting in a realtor's office, the blinds drawn against the sharp light. The realtor's office smelled faintly of fresh coffee and printer ink. Aaron sat across from a woman in a navy blazer, her hair swept into a neat bun, her eyes sharp but polite. A thick folder lay open on the desk between them, glossy photos of houses tucked neatly inside. You said you want to move fast, she began, sliding a single sheet forward. If you sign this listing agreement, I can have the photographer here before noon. The property will be up on the market by tonight. Aaron rested his calloused hands on the paper, his thumb rubbed against the edge as though smoothing a rough plank. He had built dreams in that house, one overtime check at a time, and now he was preparing to let it go without ceremony. How quick can it sell? He asked. In this market? She tapped her pen against the paper. A week, 2 at most. Cash buyers move fast. He nodded once. The pen felt heavy in his grip, but the stroke of his signature was steady. With each letter of his name, another strand of the life he had built with Lauren came undone. The realtor gathered the sheet and gave him a firm smile. Leave it with me. I'll be in touch before the day is out. When Aaron stepped back outside, the sunlight hit him square in the face. He paused on the sidewalk, letting the heat sink into his skin. The decision was no longer hanging in his mind. It was inked into a contract. He walked to the car, the silver sedan that had once felt like a gift to his wife but now sat like an unwanted burden, and pulled the door open. The seat still smelled faintly of the air freshener she preferred, the kind with a cloying sweetness that clung to the fabric. He gripped the steering wheel and sat for a long minute, staring at the dash. Through the windshield, the town moved as usual. A woman pushed a stroller across the street. A man in a tie loosened his collar as he left a diner. None of them knew that in the quiet office behind him, a marriage had just been translated into paperwork and market value. Aaron left the realtor's office with the signed agreement folded neatly in his pocket. He didn't drive home. Instead, he turned the car toward the courthouse district, the silver sedan carrying him past rows of brick buildings until the law office came into view. The courthouse district carried a hush that pressed against Aaron's chest as he stepped inside the lawyer's office. The reception area smelled faintly of polish and paper, the carpet muffling every footstep. A brass plaque on the wall bore the name of the firm, neat and unyielding. He was led into a conference room where a man in a dark suit sat waiting, a leather folder open in front of him. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, scanned a page, and looked up. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice measured. "You're here to begin divorce proceedings?" Aaron nodded. He sat, his shoulders squared, hands resting flat on the table. The lawyer opened the folder wider, revealing neat stacks of paper. "I'll need to gather some information first. Years married?" 5. "Children?" Aaron's jaw tightened. "None." "Shared assets?" "None." The lawyer jotted notes with quick, precise strokes. "You understand?" The lawyer continued. "This isn't finalized in a day. Today we prepare and file the petition. Once it's with the court, the process begins formally. She will be served papers in due time." "I understand," Aaron said. His voice was steady, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had already made peace with loss. The lawyer passed a form across the table. "This gives me authorization to act on your behalf. Nothing more binding than that today." Aaron read each line carefully. The pen felt rough between his fingers, but when he signed, his name pressed into the page with clarity. The lawyer gathered the form and tucked it into the folder. "We'll file this afternoon. You'll receive copies for your records once the clerk stamps them." Aaron rose, thanked him quietly, and left the room. Outside, the sky had turned a pale gray, clouds drifting low. He walked down the courthouse steps and paused on the sidewalk. People hurried past, lawyers with briefcases, clerks carrying files, strangers caught in the rhythm of their own routines. For a moment, Aaron stood still, his breath visible in the cool air. What had once been a marriage now existed as paperwork, a case waiting for the stamp of the court. It was no longer just a thought in his head or a plan whispered to himself. It was real. He turned, walked to the sedan, and slid into the driver's seat. The silence inside pressed heavy against him, but it was not unbearable. It was the silence of movement, of steps taken toward something final. His reflection stared back at him from the rearview mirror, steady, expressionless, unbroken. The line had been crossed, and there was no return. The sky was low and gray when Aaron steered the sedan off the main road and into the broker's lot. The place was quiet except for the hiss of tires against gravel and the clink of a wrench somewhere in the garage. A line of polished cars gleamed under the dull light, their windshields flashing brief reflections as he rolled past. A man with a clipboard stepped forward, brushing dust from his sleeve. Aaron cut the engine, climbed out, and shut the door with a solid thud. "You looking to sell?" the broker asked, scanning him with a practiced eye. "Aaron Miller," he said, extending a folder. "Title, registration, maintenance history. It's all in order." The man flipped the cover open, glanced at the documents, then crouched to study the sedan. His knuckles tapped the tire tread. He straightened, wrapped the hood twice with the flat of his hand, then slid behind the wheel. The ignition turned clean. The engine caught with a smooth hum that settled into the lot like a low current. "Good condition," the broker said, voice raised over the sound. He flicked the lights, tried the wipers, let the engine idle. then shut it off and stepped out. Mileage? Aaron gave him the number. The broker scribbled on his clipboard, then tucked the pen into his pocket. I'll handle the listing. Car like this, it won't sit long. When it sells, the funds go straight to your account. Aaron nodded once. His gaze lingered on the metallic paint, the faint scuff marks near the handle, the leather interior he'd worked long hours to afford. He said nothing. The broker closed the folder and tucked it under his arm. I'll be in touch. Aaron turned, the gravel crunching under his boots. His work truck waited at the curb, plain and weathered, its seat molded to his weight. He climbed in, gripped the wheel, and started the engine. The rumble rose steady and familiar, carrying him back onto the road. The sedan remained behind, parked among strangers, waiting to be claimed by another life. The house was still when Aaron stepped through the door. He didn't switch on the lights. The faint glow from the street lamps pressed against the windows, stretching shadows across the living room. He stood in the center of it all, the silence wrapping tight around him. He sat heavily in his chair, the one cushion molded by years of use. His hands rested on his knees, fingers spread wide, and in the stillness the memories came uninvited. The first year of their marriage, the rented apartment with peeling paint and rattling pipes. He had worked long shifts then, hauling lumber in the summer heat, welding beams until his arms ached. He had brought his pay envelope home and placed it in her hands with pride, certain that every dollar meant progress. She had smiled at him, kissed him, told him he was building their future. The night he surprised her with the sedan came back sharp and clear. He'd hidden the keys in a box of her favorite chocolates, his palms sweating as she tore away the wrapper. She had squealed with joy, wrapping her arms around his neck, pressing her face into his shoulder. He had thought in that moment that he had given her proof of his devotion. Other fragments surfaced, standing in the rain outside a pharmacy with medicine when she had fallen ill, taking on extra shifts to cover a vacation she said she needed, holding her hand at night, waiting for sleep, imagining the children they might one day raise under this roof. Each memory pressed deeper into him, not with warmth but with the ache of betrayal. Every sacrifice, every choice, every dream had been built on sand. The woman who once kissed him for the sedan now laughed in secret with another man, mocking the same presence that had carried her through 5 years of stability. Aaron leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, jaw tight. He had loved without reserve, poured himself into the marriage until his body bore the weight of it. Cracked nails, bruised palms, sore muscles turned into mortgage payments and full cupboards. For what? The clock in the hallway ticked, steady, indifferent. Upstairs, the bedroom lay neat and untouched, her scent clinging to the pillows. He closed his eyes and let the silence expand. His love had been real, his sacrifices countless, but now the past only sharpened his resolve. The third week arrived with papers stamped and phone calls answered. The realtor's voice had carried the news first. Offer accepted, contract signed, funds clearing soon. Then the broker confirmed the sedan was gone, the account credited. The lawyer followed, his tone dry and final, telling him the divorce papers were ready for his signature. Aaron drove to the office, signed where the pen was placed, and left without a word. His name stood sharp on the page, closing the last door. Back at the house, he stood in the entryway, the weight of the keys heavy in his palm. Rooms once filled with her laughter, her perfume, her presence, now felt hollow, waiting to be stripped bare. He pocketed the keys and climbed the stairs. In the bedroom, her dresses still hung in the closet, colors lined in neat rows. Jewelry gleamed faintly in trays, perfumes gathered on the dresser. He opened a drawer, pulled out a scarf, and let it slip through his fingers before laying it back. Each object was a piece of the life she thought permanent, soon to be packed, soon to be gone. Downstairs, the kitchen sat clean, dishes stacked in cupboards, the hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. He touched the counter where he had laid his pay envelopes, where he had left notes reminding her of dinner, where he had once believed love was built. His hand lingered for a moment, then pulled away. The house no longer belonged to them. The car no longer waited in the driveway. The marriage no longer held his name. Everything had been cut clean, each piece of her comfort dismantled with precision. Aaron stepped back into the living room, stood for a long moment, and let the stillness settle over him. Week 3 was done. His part was finished. The following day he called his oldest friend, a man who had known him since before the marriage, before the years of sacrifice. Together they walked through the house with boxes and empty luggage lined against the walls. Aaron opened the closet first. Dresses slipped from their hangers into suitcases, heels clattered as they were lowered into boxes. Jewelry trays were stacked carefully, perfumes sealed in plastic, photographs pulled from their frames and tucked away. Each piece disappeared into the growing pile, a life reduced to luggage ready for delivery. His friend worked quietly, saying nothing as they cleared room after room. The kitchen followed, cookbooks, dishes, little trinkets she had collected. Then the living room, the shelves stripped bare. On the bed upstairs, Aaron laid one suitcase open. He slipped a manila envelope inside, the divorce papers folded neat. On top he placed a single sheet in his own hand. "You wanted me gone. Now you have your wish." He zipped the case closed. When everything was finished, the house stood hollow. No trace of her remained, only the echo of their footsteps across stripped floors. Aaron carried his own belongings, his tools, the boxes that mattered, the weight of his workbench drawers, out to the truck. His friend loaded the last of her luggage into his own vehicle, ready to take it to her parents' house. On the porch, Aaron paused with the keys in his hand. He turned once, glanced at the empty rooms behind him, then pulled the door shut. The lock clicked, final and sharp. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and followed the road out of town. At the corner, his friend turned in the opposite direction, carrying her things to the place where she would find them. Aaron kept driving, the line of the highway stretching ahead, carrying him into another state, another life. The wheels of the plane screeched against the tarmac. Lauren pressed her head back into the seat, a smile tugging at her lips. 3 weeks of escape, sun on her skin, drinks at sunset, mornings spent with nothing but her thoughts. She rose from her seat with the easy calm of someone certain her world waited exactly as she had left it. The cab ride from the airport was slow, traffic heavy under the afternoon sun. She sat in the back scrolling through her phone, rehearsing what she would say when she saw Aaron. Perhaps she would tell him she needed more time apart. Perhaps she would spin a story about clarity and self-discovery. Either way, she assumed the same life would be waiting, steady and predictable, the way he always was. When the cab turned into her street, her smile froze. A strange car sat in the driveway. The blinds were different, pale curtains she had never chosen. Fresh flowers bloomed in beds she had not planted. She leaned forward. "Stop here," she snapped, pressing bills into the driver's hand before the cab had even halted. Dragging her suitcase, she hurried to the porch. The key scraped inside the lock but refused to turn. She twisted harder, her breath catching, until the metal bit deep into her palm. The lock had been changed. A child's laughter rang out inside. The sound cut through her. She pounded the door once, twice, her voice rising. "Aaron, Aaron, open the door!" The door opened, but not to him. A woman she had never seen stood framed in the entry, a baby balanced on her hip. Surprise flickered across her face. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, wary. "This is my house," Lauren said, her voice cracking. "You're in my house." The woman shook her head gently. "We just bought it. Closed the deal 3 days ago." Lauren staggered back, clutching her suitcase handle. She turned in a daze, pulling her phone from her bag. Aaron's number rang once, then cut to an automated voice. She tried again, faster, but the same message answered. Her hand trembled as she dialed her parents. Her mother's voice came through at once. "Lauren, thank God we've been trying to reach you." "There are strangers in my house," Lauren whispered. "My key doesn't work." Where is Aaron? Come here, her mother said softly. We'll show you what he left. The line went dead. Lauren stood for a long moment on the walk, staring at the windows of the house that no longer belonged to her. Then, suitcase bumping behind her, she flagged down another cab. The driver asked for the address and she gave it in a hollow voice. The ride blurred past. Houses, storefronts, trees, all a smear through the glass. Her chest tightened as her parents' home came into view, both of them waiting at the door. Inside, her father said, his face grave. You need to see? The house smelled of coffee and old wood polish. Lauren dragged her suitcase over the threshold, her mother's hand brushing her arm, her father's gaze following her every step. They led her down the hall without a word, their silence heavier than anything they could have said. The guest room door opened, and the sight froze her in place. Luggage, her luggage, stacked in neat rows against the wall, boxes labeled in her husband's handwriting, dresses she had folded with her own hands now folded again by someone else, perfume bottles wrapped in newspaper, shoes lined in careful pairs, photographs slid into envelopes. Her throat tightened. What is this? Her father didn't answer. He only nodded toward the largest suitcase, the one resting at the front. Lauren stumbled forward, knelt, and yanked the zipper open. Clothes pressed against one another, the faint scent of lavender clinging to them. Nestled on top, a manila envelope. Her fingers shook as she tore it open. The divorce papers slid out, each page stamped, his name signed in clean, deliberate strokes. On top of the stack lay a single handwritten note. You wanted me gone. Now you have your wish. The words blurred as her eyes filled. She pressed the paper to her chest, a sound clawing its way out of her throat. A scream ripped through the quiet house, raw and jagged, rattling the walls. She dropped to her knees, the papers scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. Her mother moved toward her, but her father raised a hand. They stood in the doorway watching as Lauren crumbled beside the suitcase, her sobs broken and uneven. Every memory of comfort shattered in that moment. The house, the car, the security she had mocked, the husband she had dismissed. All gone. Aaron had vanished, not with a fight, not with a warning, but with the precision of a man who had planned every step. He had left her nothing but the echo of her own words and the ruin of her own choices. The suitcase gaped open beside her, a coffin for the life she no longer had. And as her scream faded into sobs, the truth hung heavy in the room. Some losses are not accidents. They are the price of betrayal. If you were in Aaron's shoe, what would you do? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting and true-to-life stories.